without fear.
Mexico announces the departure of flight number 201 from Los Angeles to La Paz, Baja California. Now loading at gate
Hey,
number
that's
23.
me.
Plenty of time, Dave. Plenty of time.
I do wish George could be at the airport to meet you. Don't worry, Mom. I'll just hop up this plane, get on the small one, and in less than an hour, I'll be at the ranch.
Oh, I still wonder why they had to build that way off in the mountains like that.
Well, that's the whole point. Remote. Like Walden Pond.
His name was Dave Rogers. He was 13 years old. And he was heading for a 2-week vacation at his uncle's ranch in the remote wilderness of Baja, California, in Mexico. His folks had been getting him ready for the trip for most of the summer, and now his father was going over all the final details for what must have been the 15th time.
Now remember to check the airline counter when you land and be sure to confirm reservations for your return flight, which remember now, is the day before school.
How could I forget?
We're going to miss you. Take care of yourself. We love you.
Tight lines, Dave. Hey, I almost forgot. This might come in handy.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
Take care, Dave.
Have fun.
I still wish his first trip could have been to Mother's place.
He'll do all right. He's waited a long time for this. And Dave can take care of himself.
Like a lot of boys, Dave had never done too well in geography. But now he was curious about this mysterious 1,000-mile peninsula he was about to visit. Since its discovery by Cortez, over 4 centuries of attempts at colonization and settlement have been defeated by its jagged mountains and burning deserts. Even today, Baja, California remains virtually unpopulated for most of its length. After a 2-hour flight, the jetliner landed Dave at La Paz, the only major city in the southern part of the peninsula. Here he met Juan Ramos and transferred to a small bush plane for a short flight north to his uncle's ranch, a matter of about 60 miles. From this low altitude, Dave was even more impressed by the mile after mile of stark desolation below. They had flown about half an hour without seeing the slightest sign of civilization, when Juan pointed out a high ridge ahead. Just beyond was his uncle's ranch.
What is it?
I don't know. Plenty of fuel. Maybe a clock gas line. We'll be all right.
Is the beach big enough?
Uh-huh. Just hope the sand is hard enough.
Do you think you can fix the motor?
I'll try.
Juan? Juan? Are you okay?
There was no telling how badly Juan was hurt. It might be hours before he came to, if he came to at all. Dave was badly frightened, and in his fright, he made a poor decision. His father had always told him, if you get lost or in trouble, stay put, and let help come to you. But Juan could die before help got here, and he had said that the ranch was just over that ridge. It couldn't be too far. Surely he could get there by sundown and bring help.
Juan! Juan!
On a beach several miles to the south, Pedro, his sister Maria, and their dog Chico were making their way northward. They were following the coast because the traveling was easier and because they wanted to avoid civilization. And they were hurrying because they knew that somewhere, not too far behind, following relentlessly, was Manuel. By now, Dave had covered several miles up the steep and hostile canyon. The sun was nearly on the horizon. There was no use turning back. It would be dark before he could get even partway down.
Dave. Dave!
Obviously, the boy had gone to look for help. But which way? He could have gone either way along the beach.
Dave!
Or worst of all, into the hills. The nearest settlement was a 3-day hike across a jagged mountain range. Without food or water, Dave could never make it. Juan could only hope he'd give up and get back to the plain before dark.
XA302. XA302. Carlos, contéstame. La Paz. La Paz.
With every ridge David crested for the last hour, he'd expected to be at the top of the hill. Now, in the last rays of the setting sun, he realized instead he was in a box canyon. Even if he'd had the strength, he could go no further. In the fading light to the south, Pedro and Maria, too, had found a place to sleep just above the high tide line. Now, for a little while, there was time to rest and dream of the happier life they hoped was ahead, and to forget about Manuel. With the coming of dawn, Dave was just beginning to wake up from a long night's sleep of exhaustion. But many of the creatures of the night were looking for shady spots where they could spend the heat of the day. Juan's head was still hurting as badly as it had the night before. And he was just about convinced now that Dave was really lost.
Dave!
The trouble with the plane had been as simple as he'd thought, a clogged gas line which he'd fixed easily. But now he was faced with another dilemma.
Dave!
Should he wait here for Dave or go to La Paz for help? It was the dizzying throb in Juan's head that made the decision for him. That and the early hour. There would be plenty of time for an all-day search if he went straight to La Paz.
Yes, Mr. Rogers. Well, I stay overnight on the beach, then I thought it would be better to come and give some help. Yes, we have some plans up now.
Es chubasco. Es imposible buscarlos hasta que pase el chubasco. Dile que lo sintemos mucho, pero que no se puede.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers, but due to an approaching storm, we cannot look for Dave after today. I'm sorry, sir.
The scorpion's venom alone would have been enough to weaken Dave badly, but the long run had served to pump it through his body and increase its poisonous effects many-fold. Now, with the last of his waning strength, he managed to scratch a hopeful signal in the sand. Pedro and Maria had lived in this country all their lives, and they were quick to recognize the mark of the scorpion sting. The only treatment Pedro knew was a mud pack to ease the pain and draw the poison. But it would be many hours before the boy came to. Once again, the sound of the airplane. They knew they must not be seen in case it was Manuel. That meant hiding themselves and the stranger, too. They hid from the search planes all that afternoon, not daring to move. By evening, though, the planes had stopped coming. There were roast clams. Dave had recovered consciousness, and his appetite was back with a vengeance.
These are delicious.
Now they had to get acquainted and find a way around the language barrier.
I'm Dave. Dave. Dave? Ah, Dave! Yo soy Pedro. Pedro. Ella es María. Este es Chico. You're Pedro. Maria. And Chico. Very good. Muy bueno. María es mi hermana. Hermana. What? Hermana. Hermana. Ah, she's your sister, Hermana. Sí. I'm from Los Angeles. Los Angeles. Los Ángeles, sí. Nosotros venimos de Todos Santos. Todos Santos. Todos Santos. You come from Todos Santos. I see. Good. Where are you going? Where are you going? ¿Qué? ¿Dónde? Ah, a San Quintín, a la casa de mi abuela. San Quintín, abuela. Grandmother. So you come from Todos Santos, and you're going to visit your grandmother in San Quintín. And my uncle's expecting me. I have to find help. Help! Ayuda. Ah, mi abuela ayuda, pero ahorita dormir. Slip. Oh, sleep. Okay.
And so, as simply as that, the great adventure began. Of course, it wouldn't have begun at all for Dave, except that next morning the edge of the storm had hit. The Chubasco, the hurricane of Mexico's Pacific shore.
Dave! What is it? What's the matter? Chubasco! Vámonos! Get a Chubasco! What? Chubasco! What's a Chubasco? Chubasco! Snowstorm, shower, hurricane in Mexico. A storm's coming? Sí, vente! But I can't. I gotta wait for help. Ayuda. The aeroplano. No aeroplano. It's Chubasco. But I gotta stay here. They'll be looking for me. I got to stay here. Manuel! Hey, where you going? Adios. Hey, wait, I'll go with you.
Dave didn't know why he ran. But anyone that scared Pedro and Maria that badly had to be someone to stay away from. They could run forever on the beach and still not lose Manuel. Their best chance of escape was to climb the cliffs onto the desert and try to lose him in the brush and foliage. Chico had given them the extra few minutes they needed. Now they were out of Manuel's sight and able to double back to the beach and get away while he went after them inland. It was then they found what they'd been needing most of all. Not only a shelter from the storm, but a perfect place to hide from Manuel. Now there was time for Dave to try to learn a little more about who it was they'd been running away from, and why.
Who was that? Who was that? ¿Quién es, es Manuel. Es muy malo. Manuel, father and padre es nuestro patrón. Dos. Oh, Juan. Sí, muy malo. Sí, y nos pega mucho. Pega. He beat you? Manuel, pega? ¿Dónde padre? Where's your father? Mi papá murió pescando. ¿Murió? He died. He died? I'm sorry. And your mom? Your mother? Mother. También murió. She's dead too. And you're orphans. ¿Qué? ¿Por qué Manuel. Pearls. That's why Manuel's after you. Sí, Manuel quiere las perlas.
No las dio papá. No las dio papá.
Your father gave them to you? That's why you're going to your grandmother's house. Hope it isn't much farther.
This cave Pedro had found seemed almost tailor-made. There was firewood and clams to be dug outside. And as long as it rained, the leak in the roof meant there'd be plenty of water. For 3 weary children, alone on one of the most desolate peninsulas in the world, there could certainly have been no better place to weather the Chubasco. Yet they never stopped to question their luck. They were here, and they were safe, and for the time being, that was all that mattered. Now, at last, it was time to rest. And as Dave fell asleep, his last thoughts were of his parents. He wished he could tell them he was safe, and that he was with Pedro and Maria, and that even though he was scared to death, somehow he knew everything was going to come out fine. The storm's intensity increased. Many animals were in need of shelter too, and it was only natural that some came to the cave. They found it already occupied. But in this time of common need, there was an unspoken truce among all creatures which would last until the storm was over. The Chubasco howled its way across the coast. While in their warm, dry cave, the American boy, the 2 Mexican children, their dog, and an assortment of animal refugees passed the time in comfort and safety. Of course, there was the constant worry that Manuel might suddenly appear. But it gradually became apparent that he wouldn't, and so they waited and thought their own thoughts. By now, Dave was resigned to the fact that no help could come until the storm had ended, and as good a way to pass the time as any was with English lessons.
Stick. Right, stick. Rip. This is stick. Dick. Okay, this is fish. 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 Right, fish. Rip. Fish. Right.
Then one morning, the animals had gone, and they were awakened by a strange silence. The Chubasco was over. It was possible to travel again. Dave had no idea if search planes would be back looking for him, or if there were, whether they'd look this far north. Not that it mattered, because surely it couldn't be much farther to San Quintin and help. There didn't seem to be much need to hurry, and it felt so good to be out in the air again and get some exercise that they did more playing than walking. By afternoon, they'd only covered a couple of miles.
Chico, tráelo. Chico. Chico. Chico, tráelo. Tráelo. Let it go, Chico. Bring it back. Tráelo, Chico. Muy bien, Chico. Muy bien. Good boy, Chico. Ahí va, Chico. Ahí va. Manuel!
Dave could see it starting all over again, the running and the hiding and the fear. There must be a way to put Manuel off their trail once and for all. That was when he noticed the riptide just up the beach.
Wait, I just got an idea. And I think it'll work.
Dave's idea was a simple one. If Manuel thought they were dead, he'd go home, and they'd be rid of him forever. All they had to do was leave their clothes by the riptide, make footprints into the sea, and then hide out. It was Pedro who thought of the extra touch of realism they needed. Chico.
Quédate, Chico. Quédate. Quédate, Chico. Quédate. Quédate.
Manuel, of course, wasn't so much interested in the children as in the pearls they were carrying. Well, the children and the pearls had disappeared, apparently to a watery grave. Manuel would have to settle for the money in Dave's wallet, which, after all, was better than nothing. That evening, Pedro went fishing, and he seemed to catch another big one every time he cast his line. All in all, things couldn't have been better. There was more than enough to eat, the warmth of their cooking fire, and a bond of companionship that was growing deeper with every day that passed. But the true test of friendship comes with adversity. And the next morning brought a change in the weather and a change in their luck. It had turned cold, the piercing cold of a strong sea wind. And while leaving their clothes behind had helped them lose Manuel, now they would have given anything to have them back. To make things worse, the fishing had gone sour. After half a day without a trace of a nibble, they had to move on. And their empty stomachs only made the cold seem twice as biting. That night, there wasn't much firewood to be found, and they huddled together out of the wind, sharing their most precious possession, the blanket. They were shivering so much they hardly slept. For the first time, all three began to worry about something they hadn't even thought about before, just staying alive. For another day and a half, hunger and cold were their constant companions. And then, late one afternoon, they crested a ridge and found the beached boat.
It's okay, come on.
Cuidado, cuidado. Sí, yo sé. Mira, latas de comida.
¿Dónde?
Ven.
Many miles to the south, the search for Dave had finally begun again. And Juan Ramos was flying Mr. Rogers along the beach where he had made the forced landing nearly a week before.
Y creo que se ahogaron. Porque ahí mero estaba el perro.
¿Estás seguro?
Sí. Lo busqué bastante.
Gracias. He found the clothes on the beach north of here. 2 of the children were his charges. They must have gone in swimming, all 3 of them. And then they were caught on a rip tide. Their dog was left stained by the clothes.
Gracias. Gracias.
The boat had turned out to be full of treasures of every kind. First and most important, there were clothes. They weren't exactly a perfect fit. In fact, Maria's new dress was an old Navy shirt. But right at the moment, that didn't matter a bit.
Pedro!
There were other finds, too, a cooking pot, and even better, a store of canned food.
Mira, el jote.
Under the floorboards in the cockpit, Pedro uncovered a box of fishing tackle. And in the cabin, Dave came across some rolled-up charts. Now, at last, they'd be able to figure out where they were and where they were going. And so that evening, there was a feast for all, even Chico. There was time to study the map and to ask an all-important question.
Pedro! ¿Dónde San Quintín? ¿Aquí? Is it here? No. San Quintín está aquí. That far?
According to the map, it was well over 300 miles to San Quintín. Dave's hope of immediate rescue evaporated. And that night he dreamed of walking forever along an empty beach, knowing he would never reach the end. hadn't been time to save a thing, except for Pedro's little bag of necessities, and of course their clothes. At least they'd be a little more comfortable from this point on. But to the north, the lonely miles to San Quintin stretched almost endlessly, and there was no telling what adventures lay in wait for them ahead. For a few days, the journey was uneventful. And then one afternoon, Pedro crested a ridge and discovered a whole beach full of natives of the area. Thousands of sea lions and sea elephants.
Pedro, Maria, look at that one.
There was no danger here, of course. In fact, the sea lions were willing to leave their beach exclusively for the use of the travelers. And Chico decided to help them along a little. Naturally, there were a few that couldn't be bothered, especially a big bull sea elephant who looked as though nothing in the world could ever bother him. All 2 tons of him. He had never seen anything like Chico before, though. And try as he might, there was just no way to ignore him, much less outrun him.
Vente, Chico, vente. Déjalo, Chico.
And so the miles passed in a kind of endless vacation. And every day and every new beach seemed to provide some new kind of fun.
Tráela, Chico, tráela.
Get it, Chico, get it. It went in the hole. Get it, Chico. See, it's dead. Maria, here. Throw it again, throw it again. What happened? ¿Qué pasó, María? ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó?
No, Chico, quítate.
Move her up where it's dry.
There was no way to tell how badly the ankle was hurt. It didn't look like more than just a little scrape, but judging by Maria's pain, there was much more to it than that. They had to keep moving, though, at least until they found a good place to set up camp. So while Dave did what he could by way of first aid, Pedro went to look for something that would serve as a crutch.
See if you can walk.
wasn't long before the ankle began to swell, and traveling became a nightmare. To make it worse, this particular part of the coast was an almost endless stretch of rocky beach. It took them most of the day just to cover half a mile. Pedro had desperately wanted to stay away from civilization, for fear the news of their survival might somehow get back to Manuel. But now all that was unimportant. He had to find help for Maria. And a little later, when he found a narrow path leading inland, he decided to follow it. Away from the cool sea breeze, the heat grew almost intolerable. Progress was slow. Their water supply was dwindling fast. And the trail had faded away and then disappeared completely. More and more, it looked as if they'd made the wrong decision. But turning back now would mean they'd put Maria through all this agony for nothing.
Steve, Maria, un rancho, vengan.
Buenos días, señor. Soy Pedro, su servidor. Por favor, ¿me puede dar una taza de agua? Mi hermana viene herida. Gracias.
When it came time to look at Maria's ankle, the old man produced a bowl of some mysterious potion, a sort of home-brewed cure-all. It apparently worked just as well from the inside out as it did from the outside in.
Ow! Ooh, yuck. Maybe taken internally and externally.
for food and water. Out for Maria's ankle. Soon ankle is better. We go.
Oh, grunt.
They never did learn the old man's name. He was just Grunts who had somehow lost or misplaced the power of speech. And until Maria's ankle was well, they were his servants and his prisoners. They learned quickly they had to work hard and keep at it to make him happy, although Pedro did have one little project on the side. Each evening, he made it a point to spend some time with the burro, just in case they needed him for transportation. Maria's ankle came along nicely in the days that followed, but there was no point in letting old Grunts know that. Before long now, they'd be leaving, and the less he knew about their plans, the better. He was getting much too used to having them around to do all the work for him. In the meantime, they just worked and waited, and had a little fun whenever they had the chance. It took Grunt some time to get over the shock. But that evening he said thank you in the only way he knew how, with extra rations for the children and some ancient homemade sugar candy for Chico.
Bad guy at all. We leave tonight?
So it was time to end their stay with old Grunts. And that night, while Dave and Maria waited at a distance, Pedro took advantage of his friendship with the burro.
Hey, that boy Pedro. Way to go.
They drowsed through the night, waking up just often enough to keep the burro going in a straight line. By dawn, they figured they were a safe distance from old Grunt's place. They hoped the burro had the sense to find his own way back, but they needn't have worried about that. They were on their own again at last, heading north toward San Quintin. But even though Maria was walking well now, they had a couple of big handicaps. For one, the map said it would be many days of hard going to reach the sea, where traveling would be easier. And for another, they were very short of water.
Should have filled this thing up before we left. But I was afraid we'd wake him.
We find water soon.
Hope you're right. This sure is dry country. Un gallo. What do you think?
I don't know.
No.
Manuel might hear about us.
Yeah, you're right. But I sure do wish I can get in touch with my folks and let them know I'm all right.
Then we go to village.
No! It's too risky for you two.
But we are very thirsty. We go to village.
No! We'd better keep away from there. We'll find water someplace else.
Buenos días. ¿Qué andan haciendo?
Looks like we go to the village anyway.
Miren lo que me llena el desierto. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
¿Qué, refresco? ¿Refresco grande?
Sí. Gracias.
Nada.
Gracias.
No hay de nada.
Gracias.
¿Dónde viven?
¿En todos los altos?
¿Ah, sí? Está lejos.
Sí.
¿A dónde van?
A San Quintín.
¿De Todos Santos a San Quintín? No.
Sí, de veras.
¿De aquí hasta aquí? No.
Sí.
Tienen que cruzar este desierto. El desierto de Sierra Vizcaíno es muy malo. Muy malo.
Does anyone here speak English? English?
He's talking about the desert.
Good, you speak English.
You must cross the desert before you get San Quintín. It's very hot, very bad. Nobody crosses the desert.
Is there a telephone here?
Telephone. No telephone here.
Got gotta get in touch with my dad in Los Angeles.
You must go to the Arco. Many cars pass there.
El Orco? Where is that?
Over those mountains. Very far. But you wait for Gonzalez. And his truck, he will take you.
Really? When is he coming?
He brings on supplies in 3, maybe 4 weeks.
A month? We'll be in San Quintin before that.
That'd be foolish. You wait here. Be comfortable. Wait here.
We've already come more than halfway. We'll make it all right. It's just that...
You worry about your mother and father?
Yeah. I wish I could let them know I'm all right.
You could write them a letter.
Hey, good idea.
Señor, ¿me presta su lápiz y papel, por favor?
Sí.
Gracias.
Could you please have Gonzalez mail this to my parents?
Sí.
Gracias.
1 hour in the desert and you will be back.
Gracias. Adiós.
If the men in the cantina had thought the children were being overconfident, it was with good reason. This was the Vizcaino Desert. Not very large as deserts go, but one of the cruelest on the American continent. The sun was hotter, and the going rougher, and the terrain more bleak and arid than anything they could have imagined even yesterday. There was no shade, and never a moment's escape from the fierce heat. For 2 interminable days, they kept going, gauging their direction from the position of the sun and trying not to think of anything except their goal, a cool, almost unreal place somewhere ahead where sand dunes must eventually give way to sandy beach. On the 3rd night out from the little village, they made camp with a sense of hopelessness. Their food and water were completely gone. They had no idea how they could possibly survive another day. They'd needed the water desperately, and at the moment it seemed an incredible stroke of luck. But it was only the beginning. This stretch of sand they'd come upon was a place called Malarimo Beach, the junkyard of the Pacific. Stretched out like a gigantic catcher's mitt into the southward bound Pacific current, Malarimo Beach lies in wait to intercept every kind of floating debris from as far as half a world away. Of course, all this was lost on the children, who knew only they'd stumbled onto a beach full of marvelous junk, apparently put here for their exclusive use. After all the days and weeks of privation, this was just too good a place to hurry away from. After all, everything they could ask for was here. Materials for a house, all the comforts of home, and a surprisingly varied menu.
Sukiyaki, fried grasshoppers.
Delicious. See, delicious.
Sweet and sour squid. Turkey loaf. Beef.
Gracias.
Bird nest soup. Peaches. Peaches.
I don't like peaches. This isn't very good caviar.
On the desert, hunger and thirst had been their problem. But now that they were in the midst of plenty, they had another problem. They were getting picky. Malarimo stretches nearly 50 miles in all, and for most of its length, it's a beachcomber's paradise. Dave and Pedro spent a lot of time exploring, and a few days later they came across what might be an easier and quicker way to continue their trip.
It looks pretty good.
Que suave.
You know, all we gotta do is patch up a few of these holes.
See, we don't have to walk now.
Before long, with a few patches and a bamboo mast, the boat was ready to launch, they hoped.
I guess she's just about ready.
She's ready.
It seemed a good idea to give it a test first, though. And according to the map, the calm waters of a nearby bay looked like the ideal spot. If all went well, they'd go out into the open ocean and follow the coast north as far as they could. So they were off on their shakedown cruise in the bay. The little boat seemed seaworthy enough, except for one minor problem.
Hey, we're taking on water.
The leak wasn't serious, and they weren't about to sink, but there were other dangers ahead.
A whale! Look at that!
Ballena!
Scammons Lagoon, named for the old whaling captain who discovered it, is the breeding grounds for the great gray whale, which migrates here every winter from its home in the Arctic Ocean.
Otro!
Once hunted to the edge of extinction, the gray has made a strong comeback in the past 50 years. And every season, thousands of animals are here in Scammons Lagoon to mate and bear their calves. Well, the quiet waters of this particular bay weren't quite as safe as they seemed. But a few minutes of hard rowing brought them back to shallow water near the shore and another kind of sea creature that was much more their own size.
Hey, a turtle! Look at that! Tortuga! I get for dinner. Hey, Pedro! We don't need any food. Very good. Bad. Bad. It come out first. Good meat. Pedro? We've got all the food we need.
Pedro, please don't kill.
But she's big, like my father caught. We don't have to kill to eat.
Es verdad. You're right.
Finally, just as it had to, the day came when it was time to leave the comfort and plenty of Malarimo Beach and head north again. They'd been worried that launching the little boat through the surf would be a problem, but they deliberately waited for a calm day, and it turned out to be a lot easier than they thought. With a gentle push from the makeshift sail and the help of a steering oar, they began to make some progress up the coast. Of course, they could only sail where the wind would blow them. But since it didn't always blow where they wanted to go, and sometimes didn't blow at all, they often had to man the oars to stay on course. As long as they could see the shore, that was no problem. But late that afternoon, the fog rolled in, and the shoreline disappeared. Without a compass, they were lost. Next morning, when the fog lifted, there was still no land to be seen. At least with the sun visible, they knew more or less where north was and which way to go. But the day passed, and then the night. And real fear began to haunt their every moment. Finally, on the third day...
Land! Maria! Pedro! Land!
They didn't have the faintest idea what beach this was or how far they'd come. But they could figure all that out later. Right now, all they wanted to do was get their land legs back and have a good warm lunch. It was a meal they would never get to finish. Of course, any bull is a dangerous animal, but this was a range bull that had lived in the wild all his life, and he saw this little beach as part of his territory. Intruders weren't welcome here.
Pronto, pronto! Chico! Hey!
journey was over. And that evening in San Quintin, there was a double family reunion, celebrated Mexican style. The little fiesta was a time of happiness, partly because they were all home safe, and also because Pedro had delivered the precious pearls to his grandmother, which would go a long way toward an education for he and Maria. But afterward, there was a time of sadness, too.
Time to say goodbye, Dave.
Hasta la vista, Dave.
Bye, Maria.
Adiós.
Take good care, Chico.
And so it was goodbye, but not forever. And until they met again, there would be many memories to share. Memories of hardships and danger, of good times and laughter, and most important of all, of the friendship that would last for their lifetimes.